It starts with a cough, tightness of the chest, a wheeze to the breath. Soon, your handkerchief becomes stained with flecks of blood as you wipe your mouth. The pain is overwhelming, but you do not succumb to the sickness. You seem to be caught in a place between life and death. Then you notice others getting sick. Their symptoms manifest so fast, and before long they've perished from the mysterious illness. But they are not granted eternal rest. Instead, their bloody bodies rise and seek the flesh of those around them. Everyone but you. Hi, I'm Peter, creator and lead designer of Tales from Elsewhere, and today we are talking about the Arizona Tenor, one of the original creatures that I've created for the Clockworld setting. This is an undead spirit that spreads plague and disease and undeath wherever it goes, as its hatred for the living boils up and manifests in the world. So let's hop in and talk about the inspirations and mechanics that go into this cool creature. The Arizona Tenor is a partially incorporeal spirit, an undead ghost that looks like it's covered in weeping sores and sickness and bile and blood, just every sort of affliction imaginable bubbling out of themselves. So they're quite a sight to behold. But what makes them insidious is that they can possess somebody, be within a normal person, where you don't see them at this point. The person may even be not aware that they're possessed, as the Arizona Tenor isn't influencing them mentally, but they begin to get sick, and they have all these symptoms, but they don't die from it. They remain alive, even as they become increasingly anguished by these afflictions. So, like so many creatures in the Clockworld setting, I'm inspired by things that people were worried about in the 19th century, and a big one was consumption, tuberculosis. It was a very common and deadly issue that they faced in the time, and it's often associated with the Wild West because one of the common remedies was to move somewhere with a dry climate like New Mexico, Arizona. And so people with tuberculosis would often move west from the East Coast as a way to try to mitigate its symptoms. So it was very much tied in with the worry of the day. So making a creature inspired by that was going to be very interesting, and I thought very fun. You know, it's like a banshee or an undead spirit, but we're tying it to diseases that people of the 19th century were very, very worried about and had little ways of combating. As always, the origins of an Arizona Tenor are left somewhat ambiguous in the rulebook. It gives guidance and inspiration, but it's not trying to codify it too much, because to define something too much is to make it mundane. So the Arizona Tenor can be formed maybe by someone dying of tuberculosis but alone and forsaken, someone abandoned by their friends and family. And when they do perish from the disease, they rise as a vengeful spirit, hateful of the living. Or maybe it's someone who has accumulated too much sin in life. They're just so evil that when they do succumb to this illness, that evil infuses their blood and it bubbles and boils out into an Arizona Tenor. There's a number of ways you can start conceptualizing that, and leaving it a little ambiguous means that when the game master is trying to tell a story involving the Arizona Tenor, they can sculpt it and make it fit to the narrative they have planned, and the players can't go in with a lot of assumptions as to where they've come from. It adds a little bit more mystery to it. So design goal-wise, I know I wanted to make something like a banshee or a wraith, some sort of partially incorporeal spirit for the players to interact with. So I knew that I was going to need to make it maybe hard to hurt or can pass through walls and all that kind of good stuff. It's not something you can easily physically interact with, and so its forms of attack would also need to be similarly incorporeal or hard to defend against. I knew I wanted something that really made the player's skin crawl with its visceral description and that reaction to sickness. So the Arizona Tenor actually has a lot of mechanics to it because it is a unique threat, meaning it's meant to be fought on its own or only with a few maybe minions nearby. It's meant to be the set piece that a scenario was built around. So it has a number of afflicts, which are like status effect causing actions. It can rack people with immense pain. It can make blood start leaking from their eyes. It just really messes with people's bodies with just heaping status effects on them. And if anybody dies near the Arizona Tenor, they rise as a zombie. So the GM can have some victims already having perished, and there are zombies in the scene that add a physical threat in addition to this more incorporeal one. The Arizona Tenor has one particularly nasty attack where it will grab you telekinetically. It grabs you like a poltergeist, pulls you close, and then ravages your eyes with sickness. So this blinds you and causes your eyes to be all sorts of messed up and they start bleeding. It's really gnarly, the description I've written in the rules. And without being able to see, it makes it even harder for the player to fight back against the Arizona Tenor because now they can't see it as it phases through walls and moves about. And maybe there are zombies in the scene that blinded player now becomes an easy victim for. Now, what's interesting about making the Arizona Tenor something that does afflicts, it does status effects, is that it means players can bring medicines with them and various consumables to help combat these status effects and make their bodies more resilient. Like they can bring laudanum to make their vigor higher, or they can bring shots of liquid courage to make their grit higher. There are things that they can do to help steel themselves against their bodies being afflicted by the Arizona Tenor, and that sort of planning is fun and rewarding, the montage of gearing up to face a threat like this. In order to properly harm an Arizona Tenor, the players need to plan accordingly. They'll need to go to the church and maybe get their weapons blessed, pick up some silver bullets and holy water and anointing oil so that their weaponry can harm this incorporeal spirit, as it's very difficult to interact with otherwise. They'll pick up the medicines and inure themselves or have their armor blessed to help protect against these supernatural assaults. It's not the kind of threat you're meant to be able to just bumble into and have a chance of really destroying. It's too resilient and too strange to do so. The Arizona Tenor has playtested pretty well. I made a lot of revisions to it since its last round of playtesting, so I'm definitely going to need to put it through the ringer again. But it's definitely very evocative when the players start getting these really nasty afflictions on them or filling in injuries that are really gruesome, like their eyes kind of melting and all that kind of stuff. It's just been kind of great to really put something that gross and visceral into a fight. And the complicated issue of having some zombies nearby in a scene, because the Arizona Tenor can cause undead to rise, definitely adds a level of complexity that the players have to manage. Throw a few NPCs in there, some innocent bystanders, and you've got yourself a pretty cool fight. But I think there's a lot more we can do with this creature in the long run. Last and certainly not least, let's talk about the art. This was a very fun piece to work on with our great artist, Dr. Neri. He really killed it, as he always does. I wanted something that looked very visceral and spooky and haunting over the person, and he really got that sort of affliction look to it. There's a dustiness and a disease look to this creature, and I really loved all the details he added to it. So let's put it up here on the screen for y'all to enjoy, and if you enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button, subscribe, all the normal deal, and I will catch you on the next video.